Hello, artists and animators, and welcome to the Animation Trends event. Did you have a question about directing but didn't know who to ask? Well, we assembled a panel of directors to discuss their experiences in the animation industry. Topics include the scope and scale of a director's responsibilities on a production, career paths that lead to directing, and the skill sets that artists can develop if directing is a role that you want to pursue. So, Chaz, Evely, Liza, and Jake, welcome to the stream.
Hi.
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 Hey, what's up?
Hey, I'm so glad that you all joined us today. So why don't we start with introductions? Chaz, please introduce yourself by saying your name and the very first animation project you directed.
Okay, I'll kick it off. Hey everyone, I'm Chaz Bottoms. The very first animation project I directed was back in 2018, a Kickstarter short film titled The Indies, an animated short, and it was a really great experience. It was a remote production, so I got to work with artists from all over the world and artists of varying experiences, some super duper experienced artists and some green artists. And it was a blast. It really made me want to keep directing and keep working in storyboards and working in story. And yeah, it was a really fun project.
Yeah, I really love independent and crowdfunded animation. I think there's been a lot of amazing work that's come out of that. So it's really exciting that that was your first role directing.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. And, you know, independent, yeah, just, you know, starting in indie and working your way into the industry, you know, you learn a lot of really great skills that come and help you later down the road.
Definitely. Jake, I'd like you to introduce yourself by saying your name and the very first animation project that you directed.
Yeah, hey, I'm Jake Hollander. The first project I ever directed on was Duncanville, a Fox show at Bento Box. And yeah, it was awesome. It was a great first directing opportunity. I fell in love with directing after it.
Amazing. Liza, could you introduce yourself by saying your name and the very first project that you directed?
Yes, of course. I'm Liza Singer. I first started out directing on a show called Harper House, but only stayed for a little bit to leave for feature. Then I directed on a development project, but my first full long-term series was freshman year, Spider-Man freshman year at Marvel Studios.
And Evely, could you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the first project that you directed?
Hi. Nice to see you, everyone. I'm Evali Aguilar. My first project was Home Football, season 1 and 2. It's a small TV show for Cartoon Network, and it was a 3D project with 2D face elements, and it was a really fun project with a lot of creative liberties. So it was really nice to start with that.
I love that. I really enjoy seeing hybrid animation of like 2D faces and features on either 3D characters or stop motion. It's always a lot of fun. So I'll take the next question off to you. Evely, how would you describe the scope and scale of a director's role on an animated project, and what was it that made you interested in that role?
For me, the director must have like the complete vision of the project, and he needs to be able to guide the team around the path, no? Because every artist and all the departments may have different levels and trouble to achieve their task. So the directors, we may not be like the best artists on each department, but we have this input that can help all the crew, no? So it's a lot of communication and teamwork, but is this like general scope, no? So everyone is on the same page, and that's something that really interesting to me, because for me it's like really a lot of gratification when I see the first animatic, and then that normally is like really common for the storyboard artist to be part of the direction crew at the end, but to have the storyboard and then see the final result, and it's like, oh yes, just how I saw everything at the beginning is the final result. So that's a really good part for me to be. It gets me really happy.
That's amazing. So Chaz, how would you describe the scope of a director's role on an animated production, and what interested you in that role?
Yeah, I think the scope is pretty all encompassing of from very early in pre-production, and you're kind of gonna see the project all the way to completion. And so within that, like you almost have to have this vision, this very clear idea of what it is you want early on, and throughout working with pre-production and your storyboard artists and animators and the entire production, actors and music, like you really have to make sure you're properly communicating what that vision is, on top of making sure that any feedback from executives or any notes along the way are properly implemented as well. And that can be pretty daunting, but it's also a lot of fun. And something that really interested me in that role in directing is being a storyteller. I actually wanted to be an animator coming out of college, but I found throughout working freelance gigs and just on my own personal stuff that actually what I really enjoyed was the teamwork and collaboration aspect of animation, and also really making sure that we're telling the best story that we possibly can, from a thematic aspect, but also from like characters and working with storyboard artists was a lot of fun for me, and really being able to kind of be that leading voice on a production, or one of the many leading voices on a production, and that the people side of things too, like getting to be an artist but also have some interactions with everyone on the crew, from producers, from artists to actors. I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think one thing I've heard from a lot of artists is that they get out of animation school thinking, I'm going to be an animator, and then they discover other roles and sometimes realize that, well, this other role that I wasn't really thinking about is actually really interesting. Was that your experience?
Yeah, definitely. I think like when I was in animation school, you kind of know the main-ish roles like animator, storyboard artist, character designer, background artist. But then when you start to really have experience working on productions, you see there's even under those roles, there's like story revisionist or art director, or there are these other roles that you might not think of to begin with. And so when I actually, what made me really want to switch into directing was, man, as an animator, you're kind of burrowed in your box, just working on scenes, and you don't really talk to people. And I enjoy I enjoy collaboration and working with everyone on the production. And my experience at that point was student films, where I did everything, so I had a good idea of the production pipeline, each step, and kind of what is needed at each step. And so I was really interested in being like, oh, well, I don't mind quarterbacking projects as well, because I kind of understand how to speak like animator language and jargon, but also too, like, I get to work with people who are way better at me than drawing backgrounds, way better than me at like art directing and that side of things. And so it was really great to surround myself with people who are can help me be better in my blind spots as well. And I think that's something that's really great about directing, is you kind of get to work with hired guns, as they're called, and that are really great, and you get to learn from them and their experiences as well.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. Jake, how would you describe the scope of a director's role on animated production, and what interested you in directing?
Let's see. Directing does vary for production, based on the team and based on the pipeline and everything. But what really stood out to me was just the ability to bring the best out of my team and just take stories that you find in the scripts that you're given and just try to really emphasize every moment and build up to really bring the best out of your team, that moment, the story, because everything you break down as a director, when you're breaking down the script into the sequences and you hand those out to your team, you basically set them up to hit a home run. And as the director, you can set them up for that home run and being able to guide your team with whatever your vision and whatever their vision might be. And that's what I found the most fun about directing, because I heard this from somebody who told me that like a great director will ask for 70 to 80% from their board artists to get that scene there. And then you both make that last 20% into the best possible sequence you can get. And sometimes you just get really good ones and you're like, oh, that's perfect, whatever. But sometimes you get that moment where they inspire you to get a great idea and you're like, whoa, I love what you did there. Didn't expect that at all. Why don't we do this, this, and this? And then you have that discussion and then it can just turn into something better than you ever imagined. And working in that kind of situation, especially for a surprise, extrovert like me, we're having that communication, having that back and forth just is the best. And I get really excited about talking about that. But the other thing is just, as a director, just being able to be communicative and letting your team know what you need and vice versa is just a really great relationship. And I value that so much more than anything else. And it's been a lot of fun to do that. So that's what I think about that, Mike.
Well, I think what's interesting about that, like the animation is a very collaborative process. Like the production pipeline, you're working with a lot of different artists in a lot of different fields. And it's really cool to hear that you've had these experiences where the people you're working with can surprise you, and sometimes for the better.
Yeah, and those surprises are what you look for, because it makes everything more fun. It makes the shows better. It pluses scripts, and I've predominantly worked on a lot of adult comedies, like Duncanville, Disenchantment, those types of shows, and the best work comes from what you interpret these letters on a paper into these fun character moments. So it's really the best thing to look for.
Everyone breaks out into dance.
Yeah, and that's it. 60 people on the screen. Let's do it, guys. Budget. Go for it.
All right, Liza, I realize I'm asking you this question last, so there's a lot to sort of consider. But is there anything that you would add to describe the scope of a director's role on an animated production? And what was it that drew you into this role?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my colleagues here have definitely covered a lot of great aspects of it. For me as an individual, what drew me to directing, funny enough, I think I was always just, I always had supervisors, thankfully, that kind of saw the director in me. Very early on, even in my career, I had supervisors that are like, you're going to direct one day. And I was like, I am. And I think it had to do a lot with my enthusiasm to learn. And my desire to understand every aspect of the pipeline. Even since I early started, I always made friends with production and other artists on the team. Like I always wanted to know what they were doing, how my boards could better assist other parts of the production. And I think my supervisors saw that interest and were like, oh, you care not just about drawing, you care about the whole process and you care about making it good for everyone. So I think a lot of that drive kind of made that symbiotic relationship. And I think I also care a lot about people. I think I feel more myself as a director than I do. And like, I feel like I'm working to my best ability in the directing seat than I ever did as a story artist. And not to say that I'm, story art doesn't drive me and I love doing it, but I think the collaborative aspect of directing is so much more fulfilling. I love working with people, and I very strongly have always said that I want to create and facilitate great learning experiences and great learning environments for people, because that wasn't always there for me. I think some people, we've always had like rough jobs here and there, and I wanted to make sure if people came past me, I was always giving them the best tools to succeed in their next job. I always say to my story team the first day I meet them, my goal is to train you guys so that you take my job one day. If I'm not doing that, I'm not succeeding. So that was always very important to me. So that's, again, the long-winded answer for the interested in the role, but I think everyone described the scope aspects so well. And yeah, it's a big job, but again, it has a lot to do with people at the end of the day.
Yeah. So directing is a role that really touches on like a lot of different aspects of the animation pipeline. You really see a huge amount of the production. So Liza, I wanted to ask you, has directing given you any insights about the animation industry that you didn't have before directing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, directing gives you your first window into sort of the bureaucratic side of animation, because animation is a business and it's a corporate business. And I think, artists, we are not corporate business people. So it's definitely like, that's kind of like the biggest shell shock and the biggest thing to kind of get a sense of if you're like, oh, well, all of a sudden I have to learn about budgets and scheduling and all these other sort of, min-maxing aspects of business that, when you start as a storyboard artist, you're kind of shielded from, and the politics of it. So you kind of learn a lot about all of a sudden how much goes into the production as a whole. It's not just about the art. It's really all about all these other different sort of people that you're appeasing and why. Like sometimes we've gotten notes on episodes that are from our toys department. And so we've had to redo a character intro because they say to us, oh, well, we need, a better toy intro because we have to show off XYZ. And you're like, oh, that's really insightful to understand. I see, we're not just working for, us, we're working for the company. And so I think that's definitely an aspect of insight that about the industry and why it's an industry. And I think that that's where you kind of get more into the nitty gritty of the industry part of it, not just the animation part of it. Of course, also, I would say one thing I have a big appreciation for is schedules and understanding when to get stuff in. I don't think when you're in a solo role, you fully understand the waterfall effect, the effect, the domino effect that you have on everyone, and how important it is to get your stuff in on time, because it really impacts everyone. And when you're in the director chair, you're so aware of that. That's one of the most important things, is making sure that everyone is able to get their work in on time, because, it causes people to stay late on weekends, and you never want that to happen. And it could just be one artist, being late with their work that can cause that. So you try to really respect everyone's time when you get into more of a managerial position.
Do you find those constraints on animation, like budget and time and just practicality, merchandising, do you find that to be like an interesting puzzle to solve, or do you find that to be frustrating?
I think it's ultimately both. I think that sometimes you learn to work within the constraints, but it absolutely can be frustrating too when you understand why. I mean, certainly I find that when I've worked on higher budgeted productions, there is a certain there's an undeniable positive to having that flexibility, especially almost specifically in the schedule. I think allowing that flexibility in schedule is so important and makes a difference sometimes in terms of the health of the production. But yeah, in terms of like merchandising and so forth and working with other departments, I think that that's always an interesting and fun puzzle to kind of figure out how you're working with other teams collaboratively to put shine on their, aspect as well. Like how we work with writers, like asking them sometimes, okay, maybe we have to change the scene, but what was your reason for writing the scene? What was the character motivation? Like I always want to know, Like, I always try to talk to our writers before I start an episode and say, I mean, if you can, sometimes productions don't have that, but like, what is your goal here? So I never lose your creative goal, even if I'm changing things with the team. And I like those puzzles the most, is how to work collaboratively with everyone. And production, again, like making sure that they get everything that they need.
Well said. Evely, has directing given you any insights about the animation industry that you didn't have before you directed?
I feel I start directing like really soon because when I started like 8 years ago, all the crew was really new. So we were not with a lot of experience at all. Like we were like 12 people on the team. So we all have to step up, no, to go ahead with the production. But sometimes what really stands the most for me is that because the animators have this creative necessity, no, and this feeling to have everything that we work with so much careful and love, and we have this need to tell stories, and we hope that the things we're animating have the same feeling that us. But at the end, everything for the TV and the movies is for the client or the big company. So you have this clash in between the artists, and is that all the animators and all the crew that works on the project, the musicians, the concept artists, the animators, even the comp crew that is the more like the nerds from the composite department. But everyone has this creative need to show what they want, and the clash with the administration and the executives know that no, we need to have this budget or this money or these limitations that the animation have, no. So for the commercial input, you have this. You need to have this like mindset, no, of deadlines and requirements that the projects may need, and even if you're working with somebody else, no. So that's why if you I believe it's really important for the artists to learn to separate themselves, no, a little bit from, so their creative part don't get affected, no, and they know how to receive the feedback, and they know how to achieve the deadlines and everything. And it's like, this thing is for the client, no, and all the thing we're working, but that doesn't affect what you really want, no, and to try to have a balance of your own art and keep generating art, and for even if it's for the animation, no, because it needs a lot of work and people. But I don't know, for me it's not like that's something important, no. The indie projects, like all the Kickstarters and everything, they have their own thing, and the commercial projects have their own universe, no. But at the end, everything is made from the same people, so that's what, like, something to keep in mind.
In your role, do you wind up talking with clients?
And sometimes we get to work with the client, and we have like a big scope, no. We have projects like Lisa said, no, like it's like toys focus. And sometimes our art from the toy is so much prettier than the final toy. And it's like, oh, I want them to fix their toy so it's as cute as mine. But sometimes we don't get to work with the client much, and we only receive like the feedback, no, from take to take. So for my part, I really like more when the client is more present, and they have this also, like this feeling that, oh, they also are really invested with the project, and they have an input, and they like comment and interact. Because when they are really like out, and we just know from them until the end, it's like oh, this is my son. Why are you taking it away from me? No, and butchering him. But it really depends on the project. No, like sometimes the movies, the director is more present. Sometimes if they are like really short animation short films, we just have executive revisions. So you need to start like having that to work with all the things that can happen.
Chaz, has directing given you any insight about the animation industry that you didn't previously have?
Man, I feel like so many things that I want to say, they have been so greatly stated already. I can say that you know, I think one thing for me, coming from the independent freelance space into the studios, you know, learning how to work, I think, within constraints and schedules is actually um, something that I didn't really think about. And, you know, I've directed music videos, ads, commercials, short form content, and worked on full length episodes. And each one of those are different types of projects that require different scheduling, have different budgets. And so, really learning how to manage uh, your own expectations, but also the whether it's a client, whether it's the executives, whether it's your team, um, being able to kind of have that big picture view of knowing what it's going to take to make this project the best it can be, given the schedule and given the deadlines and given the budget, has been really helpful. And actually, it's something that I never even truly considered. I always thought that, it's like, oh yeah, it's different if you have 6 weeks versus 6 months, to work on a project. And so just being able to manage all of those expectations, even coming from the independent space, like sometimes the client is like someone who it's their first time even working with an animator or with an animation studio. And so there's a whole nother like step of like then having to be able to describe the process, so that way when you're not getting a when you turn in the fully finished project, they're not like, oh, now we can actually give notes on it, which I've had happen before. So I think like directing you really do you really are on the front lines of a lot of the creative decisions, and I think the overall just like success of a project. And that's something that I didn't really previously like think about until I was actually in the roles and doing it. And it helps a lot, because I think it just uh you're able to maximize your time and your team's time and not waste anyone's time, of knowing like, all right, here's what we can do. We have 6 weeks. Let's not do any crowd shots. Let's not do any like crazy complicated dance numbers or fight scenes. Or if we are, like, this is really where we want to put all of our time and effort into, and here, we can chill on this part of the project. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I feel like Liza and Evely really hit the nail on the head with a lot of it as well.
Yeah, Chaz, do you have any advice for artists who are going from maybe directing for independent projects to working with a studio?
Yeah, I think the the traditional route for I guess the studio directing, typically you start maybe as a story revisionist, and then you go to story, and then you ultimately become a director. So that's kind of the um, ladder. And a lot of what I think they look at portfolio wise is going to be storyboards. It's going to be animatics. It's like, what is your voice? How do you board? Like there's a lot of storyboarding that goes into directing, and a lot of like drawovers. And so I would say like having personal projects that you're able to work on and really showcase your voice and the type of shows you would want to work on, or the type of projects you'd want to work on. Having samples that show that you can work on a Spider-Man Homecoming or a Spider-Verse. Like, there's a difference between kind of what directors would be looking for based on that project, and also too just being vocal about what it is that you want to do. I think if you are able to start as a story revisionist and just kind of make it be known that directing is something you would ultimately like to do, you'll be able to find people, I think, who will help you on your journey, getting to that point. I'm also a huge believer in manifesting, so definitely like saying like I am a director, or I'm going to be a director. Really believing that, and having work that shows that like, oh, this artist is capable of leading a team and being a director.
I guess it's really hard to be a director if you believe, well, I can't be one. This is not something I can do. That would make it more challenging.
It would,
so,
yeah.
Jake, I know that you've had roles with the Animation Guild, but has directing given you any insight about the animation industry that you didn't have previously?
Let's see. I think being organized in general is a really important factor. So, my role in helping the Animation Guild is just another extension of being able to organize things to help out where I can, but the directing as a whole, as everyone really very efficiently covered, being the last one to kind of cover it. I think the biggest thing that everyone's saying is just, it really is just about how you communicate with your team, being excited to come there and try to make what you have the best you can. And I'll just reiterate that, you have a lot of restrictions that can sometimes turn into challenges that become something you never even expected. Like for instance, like one of the foundational elements of TV animation is just how quick the pipeline is. And sometimes you don't even have time to be like, ooh, how can we really develop this? Or how can we take this thought and really give it the time it needs? And sometimes being so snappy with those decisions give you some really incredible results. And, the alternative is like, you could sit there and kind of noodle around and try to figure out what to do. But sometimes just making those decisions, making sure that everyone knows you have made a decision, because that's another important thing. Now that I think of it, one of the biggest foundational elements of being a director, I think, is to say, okay, this is what we're doing, go with it. Because if you give somebody kind of like a half foot in, half foot out answer, they may not know how to apply that. So clarity, communication, knowing how they communicate, knowing how you communicate, just making everything as seamless as possible. And then like to what you were saying about like ripping the layers back of what animation is, it's just like Liza said, it is just, it is somewhat extremely corporate, and we're making a product. Everyone's reiterated it, and I couldn't agree more. It is a product that you make, but the fun part is you have the opportunity to be extremely creative with that product. And that's kind of the balance of being a director. Making a product really pretty, really relatable, really funny, really sad, really, dramatic, and that's kind of the whole jam. So there it is.
Nice. Jake, I wanted to ask you the fun question. What are the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered about directing?
I think the biggest misconception, and I'm glad it was a misconception, is that, you walk in there and you're like, this is my idea and I'm gonna make my vision. I think it's a huge misconception, because that's not directing at all. You have your ideas, you have your moments in your mind when you read the script and when you break down sequences and when you do things, but you're not the one who does everything. You need a team. You need to talk it out. You need to let storyboard artists do what they do best. story, you know? And I think the biggest mistake you can make and the biggest misconception is to think that your ideas and your art and you are the most important answer to the conversation, because it really is important to hear your team, to hear other people's thoughts and opinions, and especially the writers or the showrunners, your other directors, your supervising director. There are so many factors, and you can't be upset about it. You can't be upset if somebody's like, "Oh, I have this idea," and you can't ever just say, well, this is what I want, you know? And you should never say that, because that's how you make things stagnant. That's how you lose great ideas, and the kernel of like a beautiful thing can be destroyed just by saying, I want it my way or something. So I think that's a huge misconception. And I think the other biggest misconception, sorry, like as I'm talking, I'm like, I thought of another thing, is that it's easy to give notes. It's easy to just say, here's my red line. Here's what I want. Do it, right? And I think I barely touched on it, what I said last time, but everybody has a different way of communicating. And you, as an individual, have a specific way of communicating and receiving information. And one of the biggest misconceptions is just not realizing that you have to understand how people communicate so that you can best give them the tools that they need for you to communicate notes, for them to communicate to you. Otherwise, you can have this kind of wall you build around you and your team where they may not be able to communicate to you or afraid because of how the communication language breaks down. So knowing how to communicate to your team, knowing how they communicate, and sometimes that means different communication methods for different members of your team. And that ultimately is something I see that everyone forgets. So I think it's really important and arguably the most important thing. So
that's
that's
great.
what I think, Mike.
Liza, what are the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered about directing? Oh, you're on mute right now.
Sorry about that. No, I think Jake covered it well about communication. I often say that the role of a director is a facilitator, more so than an idea guy. That's what your EPs are there for, and even then, they might be answering to, I was about to say a higher power. I guess it's more literally a higher power, which would be, their bosses there, which are the executives there, and then of course the CEO might have even things to say. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions too that a lot of people get confused when I've talked to them is the difference between a feature director and a TV director. Feature directors are a lot closer to what executive producers are, the showrunners that sell the show. Directors for animation are a little bit more middle managers, and actually, in feature, a director is assigned the whole film. In TV, that's what sort of the supervising director does. They're assigned the whole season, the whole series, and then each director is assigned select episodes. So you might get, like on Spider-Man, I got 5 episodes, but you might get only 3 on a rotation of multiple directors on a 10-episode series. It depends on, you might get 1. So really depends on the kind of show you're on. And so you're focusing on bringing that specific episode and that specific team that is under you sort of to the overall show vision. And especially because every artist is a different personality, different, way of working. You might have green artists, you might have experienced artists. You have to know how to bake it all into one cohesive package that makes the show all look the same. If you're working on a 2D production, you might have to make everyone make sure to follow a certain style guide, a way of acting for the characters. For 3D productions or any production, it's camera language. How does the camera function in your show? And having that library of knowledge is really important as a director, and fully understanding that. So again, as Jake already covered, communication is really, really, really key. And being a good communicator is almost more essential than being a good artist. I mean, you have to know how to look at things and be able to detect and change things as a director. So you have to be able to think fast and on the fly as an artist. But again, it's how to cultivate and how to shape. And again, you're not a one-man show. So it's letting the artists do what they do best and not taking control of their work will make the director chair a little bit easier too, because some people think that they have to do everything and touch everything.
Evely, what are the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered about directing?
Well, we already say a lot of it, but mostly that we have different levels of how much we can actually direct, like on a creative freedom, and how much you need actually to carry what the project may need and have it delivered to the artist, no? And I'm so happy with the things that Jake and Lisa already say, that it's like, oh yes, everything you say, I'm on it. But also, one thing that also, like, to say another thing about this is that well, on my perspective, on my day to day, I have barely seen any woman directing, and it takes, I don't know why. Normally, we don't have a lot of supervisors also that get to be like on women's on that position, but it's really sad because we have a lot of creative artists, no, on our view, but normally all the women take this position of production, no, and there are a lot of artists, animators, like woman animators and woman on the art department, that move to the production department instead of moving to the direction department. And I believe that is maybe a lot of this, like, because I have encountered like, that if a woman starts like taking decisions, like hard decisions, not like, no, we cannot do this, or we need to take this path instead of the other. Sometimes it gets more on you get too bossy, or it's more of a, they cannot communicate. And so a lot of girls start of taking this production and like administration roles instead of moving to the directing path, no? And a lot of boys, they are not so afraid to take the jump, no, from being an artist to get to the direction. And really, at the end, being a director is a lot of communications and taking care of your crew. Even it doesn't matter if it's an independent or a TV show. No, it's taking care of your crew. So I believe like everyone should be like able to take this decision, no? And if they think that they can handle it's a lot of pressure, but at the end, if you are good, if you know how to take care of your crew and have the organization skills and this ability to see more, like a little bit of everyone, like, what is this person doing and this person doing? It's a role that a lot of people could take, but they are not. They don't dare to do it, no, because they get scared of maybe I'm not good enough. And I believe that it's not like you need to have a 10 years experience to take the role, no? It's just have the guts to do it.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of untapped talent in the animation industry that we're just starting to realize how many people could be directors, how many people could be in these different roles that maybe have been overlooked before. So I think that's a very, very good point. Chaz, from your point of view, what are the biggest misconceptions that you've encountered about directing?
Yeah, trying to think like what hasn't already been said. I guess just to piggyback off of that last point, you know, growing up, I didn't see a whole lot of black or brown animation directors, and you know, the biggest misconception I kind of had coming into the industry was that there weren't any. And kind of throughout my journey so far, I've actually found that that is that there are, and but it's still not enough to the point where I think that it's like widely broadcasted to black and brown students that you can be a director in this industry, and your path might have to look a little different just by kind of how the history of the industry is kind of formed since its inception, but that you can do it. And there are kind of unseen barriers that we kind of have to go through, but don't, throughout that journey, don't let anyone like basically take your voice away or try to tell you that you can't do it. You know, there's haters in every industry, and I just feel like me coming into this, I kind of knew that the odds were stacked against in a weird way, but at the same time, the animation community is small, especially when you start looking at like storyboard artists and directors as well. And so, you know, we're all in this together. And I think since I've been in the industry, like we've seen a change, but you know, animation takes 3 to 4 years to make, so we're always a little bit behind the eight ball when compared to like live action, which I think they've done a fantastic job of bringing in women, bringing in black folks, bringing in people from all over the world to be directors, to be writers, to have their own TV shows. And you know, I think the biggest one of the biggest misconceptions that I've encountered is that like animation kind of has to almost play it safe. And I feel like we're just now kind of getting to that point where visually we're starting to see just incredibly amazing looking projects. Obviously, Spider-Verse, Moon Girl, and Devil Dinosaur, Arcane, like that have diverse leads, and are trying to do something different. And even, you know, that makes everyone better. It makes our industry better as a whole. It allows for us to tell different stories that still are universal and still can connect with everyone. But it's someone else holding the mic this time instead of the kind of typical what we're used to seeing, people holding the mic. I don't know if that's like, if I properly answered the question, but I felt compelled to just kind of speak on it because it's been so my journey, and people who I also know in this industry who are still in the early stages of their career. It's something that we talk about a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also just want to take a moment too to highlight that there are organizations like Women in Animation, Rise Up Animation, and the Animation Guild that provide mentoring and networking opportunities for artists. And it can be a really great way to get into the industry and find out about roles you might not have known about. And it's just a really great resource like that you can tap into for anyone watching who's interested in maybe becoming a director. So with that in mind, Chaz, do you have recommendations for artists who are... Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's also Black and Animated and Asians in Animation too, and they're great resources run by really awesome people. And it's a good community to talk about all of that stuff. So another thingy.
Amazing. Yeah, so definitely. With that in mind, Chaz, do you have recommendations for artists who are interested in directing and any resources they might be interested in?
Yeah, the thing that I always that really helped me, I feel like find my rhythm and my groove as a director, early on was studies. Um, I literally just finding a sequence in a movie or a TV show that I really like, that really brought a response out of me, and either reboarding the whole thing, like just frame by frame, pausing it and trying to quickly thumbnail out, like, oh, all right, I start to see the logic behind why they did this cut, then this cut, and then this cut, and why this cuts this short and this cuts that short creates this impact. Um, and doing it with a group too. I know that and we're in the era of Zooms and FaceTime and Discord. Like it's easier now than ever, I think, to kind of get a small group of artists together and uh, learn together. Talk about those studies together, and I think too, like doing like knowing what type of just I don't know, finding stuff that really inspires you. We all talk about creative, but at the end of the day, it's a job, and sometimes it's easy to get burnout. And so kind of knowing ways to either avoid said burnout or just having um, your process for when you start to feel a little tired or dragged down. For me, it's going to museums. It's looking at international animation, stuff that you wouldn't even think to look at. Annecy always has some like really great stuff. I can't remember the name of the website, but there's a website that is always sharing like just really great. Is it Katsuka? Yeah,
Oh yeah, that's the
Katsuka.
one.
Yeah, all right, cool. Katsuka is great. Like follow them on social media if you have it, just because um, it'll always show up some just amazing inspirational like animation clips or from different projects that you might not have even heard of. And two, one thing that I always think is good is you know, for me, something that really helped was transforming my social media feed from just it's friends, it's family, to these are artists who I uh, admire, want to work with, have worked with. So that way, whenever I open up Twitter or Instagram, I can see someone. My favorite is always seeing someone's warm up that they're like, "Oh, I did this in 15 minutes, and it's the most beautiful piece of art you've seen." um, and just being a part of finding a way to engage with that community, and you don't even have to necessarily post art all the time, but if you see something that you like, leave a comment, leave a like let kind of people know that you're on you're here, you're a part of this industry. That's been really successful for myself and my friends, as well, who are we're all moving through the industry kind of together. And then too, just like if you are on a project where you do get to have a kind of open relationship with your director in terms of communication and talking about your future career path, finding ways to get current directors, getting their eyes on your art and your stuff, the earlier the better, because they'll hopefully be like honest in a way that gives you a place to kind of go in a direction of like, here's kind of ways you can improve. Here's you can hear their stories and how they got into it. That's always super helpful to everyone had to get to their point in the career where even if you're an art director or a director or just an animator, that has valuable, I think, insight for folks who are interested in the medium. Yeah, those are just some recommendations. Like just try to like immerse yourself into the world of animation and also like directing and just watching anything or finding anything that you can on kind of what it takes and what the day-to-day life of a director is. And hopefully you watch this panel and you get something from it. There's been a lot of great stuff said.
All right, so we're running out of time, so I just want to go around quickly. Jake, I have two questions for you. One is, where can our viewers see more of your work or follow you on the web? And two is, do you have any resources you can recommend to artists who are interested in directing?
The resources for directing, there's Chaz gave a lot of really great examples. Just looking at the things you like to help develop your own style, because most people like look for things they admire in other people to develop their styles and develop what strengths they think they have, but gravitate to the things you like and build off of that and get better at those things and really narrow in on what it is you like. And like another thing that Chaz also said a little differently, but tell everyone you want to be a director. Don't hide that. If you want to be a storyboard artist, if you're a revisionist, if you want to be a director, if you're a storyboard artist, communicate those things. Tell other directors, like Chaz was saying, get that feedback to get you to the next step. Believe in yourself enough to know that this is something you want, and by saying you want it, then somebody may very well be like, oh, I remember this person telling me that they were interested in directing and I like their board work. And if they said they're ready for directing, why don't we give them an opportunity? So it's those kind of things. The more people who know where you want to grow into, the more you'll pop up in their head. And I know that's very specific for people who are already storyboard artists and already working. It's a lot easier to say, hey, I want to be a director if you've been a storyboard artist and you're working. So tell people what you want, and don't be mean about it, but just be like, yeah, directing is something I've always wanted to do and I'm really excited about it. How can I learn from you to be more of a director? Because your directors today might be their supervisors tomorrow, and they might remember that you were an amazing storyboard artist, and now they're a supervisor, and now you may be an amazing director on their team. So those kind of communications are so valuable, and believe in yourself, whatever. But like resources, there's a bunch of resources. There's so many Discords that you can join. Like just looking at my Discord, there's a ton. There's like specifically on directing though, I will suggest a bunch of union artists and I created a Discord called Animation Story Group, and a bunch of us just critique people's work whenever they pop up on that server. So there's channels for that, for Ask Industry Pros. So if you're interested in having a direct communication line with working professionals and you're interested in getting into the industry, having a good portfolio is extremely important because it hedges your bet, so that when you're like, hey, I want to be an artist, and somebody's like, what do you got? And you're like, I have my sketchbook. It's way better to have 3 board examples or your own personal work, like Chaz was saying, and everyone's been saying, where it's important for people to know what you like and what you enjoy doing, so that they can say, oh, that works for the show I'm on. So what's up? So those kind of resources are really good. And what was the other thing?
Yeah, so we have maybe 30 seconds left for your response, but where can viewers see more of your work or follow you on the web?
Sure. I'm not very prominent online. I don't do a lot of stuff, but if you just type in Jake Hollander, you can find my website, and that has all the links to my social media. But lately I've been extremely obsessed with a webcomic that I do called The Yoke Bros, and that's what I do all day now. So it's great.
Okay, I need to check that out. Liza, where can our viewers see more of your work or follow you on the web?
Yes, so you can find me on Linktree at /Liza Laser Singer. So laser spelled LASER, and then I have that account on every social media platform. I don't use them super regularly, but I have them. I want to use TikTok more when I'm freer. But Twitter, Instagram, all those. I also have a website, liza-singer.com. I don't have my socials linked on there, but you can see public board samples and other work I've done, like more illustration work. Yeah.
And Evely, where can our viewers see more of your work or follow you across the web?
I mostly don't post anything, but because
Honestly, that's a good decision.
I'm not.
The only winning move is not to play.
Yes, but I'm trying to have more things on my art station. Either way, everywhere, I'm just Evaliogo, like my nickname there. Everywhere. On Twitter, Facebook, Instagram is just the same. Um, and I will be happy if I'm always like a lot of students or people used to write me and show me stuff because I used to help at one university sometimes. So I'm happy to see if anyone wants to share anything with me. I'm totally open.
That's so cool. Well, I want to thank you, Chaz, Evely, Liza, Jake, and I also want to thank our audience for joining us for the Animation Trends event. The Animation Trends event is an online conference hosted by Toon Boom Animation, and you can visit toonboom.com for details about interviews, panel discussions, and speed training courses. And we hope that you tune in to the next discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.